Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and I'm so happy to be here today with you. I'm excited to talk about this topic as well today because it's a deep one, and it's one that's really important that we address and that we bring to light as we're healing from emotional eating, as we're changing our relationship with food. And the topic we're going to talk about today is dealing with our emotions without food, and mainly that feeling of being scared to do life when we actually heal our emotional eating behaviors, right? We focus so much on strategies and on uh, coaching and tips and um, ways we can learn how to overcome emotional eating, how to heal toxic relationships with food, but we don't often talk enough about the feelings that we actually have when we actually succeed at that, and not addressing those potential uncomfortable feelings ahead of time is one of the biggest reasons as to why we can sabotage ourselves. So again, like I always say, you can't heal what you can't see. So I always like to bring everything to the surface. So today's episode is really going to be about bringing to the surface that particular aspect of healing from emotional eating. And it's emotionally complex. It's a subject that's not talked about that often. And the fact that it is so hard to stop emotionally eating is the reason why that gets a lot of the attention. But let's talk more about actually honoring and grieving the process of healing from emotional eating. We're really going to dive deeper into that piece of it because I want that piece of it to be in your mind, even if you are not even if you're in a place where you're like, oh, I'm not even close to healing emotional eating. Like, I still binge at night. I still turn to food when I'm stressed. I still compulsively eat. I still find myself wandering into the kitchen pantry at midnight or mindlessly eating the food off my kids' plates. Like, you feel like you're so not there. This is actually a good time to then let this information and let this idea, concept, future situation for yourself sink in, because when it does come up for you, and I believe that if you're listening to this, you will be at a place where you are healed from these eating behaviors, and you will get to the place where you are feeling that grief potentially, and you are feeling that kind of weird twinge where you thought you'd just be so happy, but why are you also feeling so, why are you also feeling this like pit in your stomach, or maybe you're feeling even some sadness. And I want to name that right now, that is the grieving process that comes along with healing from emotional eating. So, I'm going to tell you a little story about me. When I was trying to heal from my own emotional eating habits, one of the reasons that I think it took me so long and so many years to heal was because somewhere deep down, I think I didn't want to. Now I could say that, right? Now I could say that, but I think now, looking back in hindsight, I could say that. But I think it took me so many years because deep down I didn't want to. I often say that food was my best friend. When I was really in the throes of emotional eating, and when I was in those years of my own late night binges, and um a lot of my mental and emotional energy was tied up in my relationship with food and my body. I I don't think it was a good best friend, right? It was one of those kind of frenemy, probably, most likely. But food was my closest confidant. It was the place that I knew I would always turn to make me feel better. And if I'm being really honest, to make me feel anything at all, right? It was the place I would go to be distracted from things I didn't want to deal with. It would be the place that I would go to in times of uh, aloneness or boredom, and that's something I also talk about a lot. It's being bored and the space between when we have heightened sensations of our lives, right? It's like, what do we do in those down times? I would turn to food for that. And so, I mean, in essence, it was my most significant relationship. And I don't know if that is something that you resonate with, but I know a lot of my clients resonate with that. And for me, that was a reality for many years. And it's definitely something that I talk about now. But even when I am speaking it out loud, I have a little bit of shame talking about it. And I have a little bit of sadness as well for that part of myself that felt that way. And it just also makes me so proud and happy how far I've come. And I know the work I've put in. And going back into that time, there was always this internal battle that I realized I had. I think it was more unconscious then, but now I can speak to it more again in hindsight. Because there was this part of me that really, really wanted to stop my toxic behaviors with food. And there was a part of me that knew that it was keeping me from living the life that I really wanted. Not only was the energy and time it took for me when I would give all that time and energy to eating, that took away from life, but also the outcome of that, which was not feeling good in my body and not feeling good in my clothes, and therefore just not participating in my life at the level that I really desired and deep down really wanted to. And when I would try to heal, there was that part of me that really wanted to stop, right? Like I just was like desperate to stop. But then there was a part of me that was terrified of letting them actually go. And I couldn't articulate it back then. But what that looked like for me about 15 or so years ago was that I'd end up sabotaging myself. I'd end up, I would end up feeling like my eating behaviors were under control. And I was at that rock bottom feeling where I was like desperate to be better. I'd plug in, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but you would get that kind of rush of like, okay, that's it. I'm at my end. Like I need to fix this now. Like I need to get better now. I deserve, right? You all of a sudden have this access to your higher worth for a hot second. And you're like, I deserve to live my best life. And then I would feel like I was in control for a little while. And then before I knew it, I would sabotage myself. And when now I understand that it was really because I didn't properly honor and grieve what losing those coping behaviors would feel like. And having this awakening, having this awareness, having this capacity to hold space for that grief is probably one of the biggest identity shifts that I support my clients with within my framework and coaching. Okay. So when I always talk about how healing emotional eating, permanently losing weight, food is not the main thing. This is what I mean, right? We have to grow a bigger capacity for all of the ways that now we're not going to have food in our lives to support us in that same way. Okay. So an example I want to give you is one of my most inspired clients, right? I worked with this woman and she was such an inspiration to me. She's a badass lawyer. She's a mom. She makes millions of dollars a year, owns her own business. She lost 90 pounds while we worked together. And she would still share with me, right? So she had all of these outward successes, right? Multimillionaire, massive business success, mom, partner, everything on the outside. She's lost 90 pounds. And almost every session, we would work on this with her about how she had some sadness that she had over letting go of the toxic eating rituals that she knows were essentially making her miserable. And we would talk about it. And this is something I want to normalize, because just because she's talking about it doesn't mean that she's still in it. And that is the difference. And that's what's so valuable about being able to have your inner stuff, your inner voice, your inner fears heard in the coaching container, right? In that supportive container, because when we speak it out loud, we can release it. And in the beginning, I think she wasn't really she didn't really want to say it, because I think she thought that by saying it, that meant that she was doing it. But what she realized was that by saying it, she was actually releasing it. And so what I want you to take away from that story, and what I tell my clients all the time, is that healing isn't healing. When you heal from emotional eating, when you heal from toxic eating behaviors, it's never going to be that you never have the urge to do it. It's never going to be that it just all of a sudden disappears. The urge, the sadness, you're always going to have the feelings. Because when we heal emotional eating, we don't all of a sudden not have feelings. In fact, when we heal emotional eating, we probably feel our feelings even more now. So the skill of navigating through those emotions so you can live your highest value life and be truly happy, that is the healing. Okay, so I want you to think about this. I'm going to give you a little bit of an exercise. Okay, how would you feel if I said to you, you have the permission to want to binge? Okay, I'm not saying that you have the permission to binge. So see where your mind goes, but you have the permission to feel the urge and the desire to binge or to turn to food as a coping mechanism. Okay, where does your mind go immediately? Does your mind go to, oh my God, she's telling me I can binge, and then, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you have permission to want to binge. That's different. Okay. What if I said you could feel that desire and you can recognize that you don't have to give into it, and that it's actually an opportunity for you to feel so deeply into what this behavior of emotional eating provided for you and figure out new ways to meet those needs. You see, because when we're afraid to meet ourselves in this emotional, vulnerable place, we can't be there for ourselves. Okay, so when we're afraid to feel these feelings, when we're afraid to meet ourselves, we can't be there for ourselves. And when we can't be there for ourselves, we're susceptible to self-sabotage and staying on the hamster wheel of the toxic behaviors, weight fluctuations, unfulfilling relationships, lack of purpose in our lives, etc. So to go back to my story, I realized finally, what I realized was that I didn't really know myself. Okay, I didn't know myself well. Okay, when I think back to the story I told you in the beginning, when food was my best friend, it was my best friend because I didn't really know myself. Like my core values, my needs, my self-worth, and my self-value. And that's why I was scared to let go of the food behaviors. And it actually has zero to do with the food itself. Okay. Not letting go of the food behaviors has zero to do with the food itself. Usually, it wasn't that the food was too tempting or that I was helpless around the food. The truth was that the big empty space that was my identity was something I wasn't willing to explore, subconsciously, of course. So it wasn't that the food was like, speaking to me from the pantry and that I couldn't contain myself. It was that I didn't have an identity that I felt I understood or knew. I wasn't empowered. I didn't know myself. And so I used food to distract that truth. Okay. And some people don't know themselves. Some people know themselves and aren't living their authentic life. And that could end up be another reason. I was young, right? I was early 20s is when I think about this. So I didn't know myself, but it's a deep value that I did know myself. And it was a deep value that I was living an authentic life. And so food was, quote unquote, protecting me from feeling that disappointment. But really, it wasn't protecting me, it was hurting me. So once I got courageous and I did the work and focused on the things that mattered to me, right? I did the work. I was like, what are my values? What are my all like I did all this work, right? I tried stuff. It didn't work. I put myself out there. I got rejected. Like all these different things. I lived. I lived and I figured out who I was, right? Because that is how we learn about ourselves. We have to actually put ourselves in the world. We can't learn about ourselves and what we value and need. And, we can have some sense of that. But a lot of times that gets refined by putting ourselves out there and getting feedback, by not getting our needs met, by having our values, having somebody kind of, what's the word I'm thinking about? Not reject our values, but live in a way that doesn't sit well with us. And then we realize that, wow, that's a value that I have. Okay, so that's how we learn about ourselves. So once I got courageous and did that work, and I focused on the things that mattered, and I started implementing them, a funny thing happened. My behavior with eating changed. Okay, it wasn't that I got willpower and my behavior with eating changed, and then my behavior with eating changed. It unfolded out of me doing all this work. Because as I started to prioritize myself and live for my values, the less I wanted to hurt myself or make myself feel bad in any way. And you are hurting yourself when you emotionally eat, when you binge, when you abuse food in any kind of way, when you make yourself feel bad. So I could sit here, I can give you a list of other coping mechanisms you can do to replace binging. And yes, sometimes meditation, taking a walk, calling a friend, a trusted friend, these are all good, right? Like doing yoga, all these different things, getting a pedicure. Okay, I can go on. And I can give you a list. But if I'm being really, really honest, and I always want to be honest with you, there are days that I still feel the devil on my shoulder. And the best way I know how to make her disappear is not to replace her with something else. Instead, it's leaning in actually even more and actually thanking her for being there for me for all the years I needed her to make me feel safe and loved. And internally having this dialogue with myself and telling her I don't need her anymore, but it's giving her attention. It's not trying to just replace her with something. Oop, she's here. Yuck. It's hot, right? Devil is hot. So that was my joke. And say like, oh, let me just throw some water on her, replace her. No, I'm actually like, okay, I'm willing to lean into the heat here. Let's have a conversation. And I slow it down a little bit. And though at first it was really hard to do, there were moments of intensity. There were moments of intense grief. There were moments of intense anxiety. There were moments of intense edginess. There were moments that I failed at this and I turned to food anyway, right? So it wasn't perfect right away. But over time, I got better. I got better at it. And eventually the feeling subsided. And on the other side was a much deeper and more authentic feeling of love that I felt for myself. Like like real love. Like I now was my own best friend. Food wasn't my best friend. I am my own best friend because I know what I need. I know what I value. I know what I really want. And I believe that I deserve to have that. Okay, so that is all that I have for you today. But I want to share something with you. I want to share that if you are looking to start your journey with overcoming emotional eating and weight loss, all of the skills and identity work that I just talked about today that helped me overcome my 15-year struggle with emotional eating and permanently lose 40 pounds 12 years ago that I never gained back, I packaged in to a course called Decoding Permanent Weight Loss. It is my proprietary foundational framework that I teach only to my one-to-one clients that when applied and implemented provides the key to permanent weight loss and lasting behavior change. I promise this. And for a limited time only, it is $47. The regular price is $5.97. So head to my website immediately under the Work with Alana tab, and you can just enroll right away. Okay, so all you do is just go, click enroll now, and you get that massive discount. Okay, so I really hope to see you inside that program. And thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to join me again next week with another new episode about emotional eating so you can fall in love with eating, start losing weight, keep it off with sustainable strategies, lasting change. And if you found this episode insightful, please subscribe, leave a review on Apple. That would mean so much to me, and share it with those who may benefit from this empowering knowledge. I also have lots of free resources on my site to support you on your journey to loving food, losing weight. Just go to www.bewellbyak.com. We also have a brand new look. So if you haven't seen the new website yet, it is beautiful, if I may say so myself. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.